Good afternoon, everybody. Here we are for another sermon preview, looking ahead to this Sunday where we're going to be covering Mark chapter 11, verses 27 through 33. We're in a pivotal point here in Mark's gospel where Jesus has re-entered the temple complex following his disruption of the temple racket that we saw last time out, where he is turning over tables and moving people off of their booths and disallowing anybody from carrying out these poor practices that were becoming associated with God's temple. And so here we have a moment of conflict that begins here at the end of Mark 11, but that's going to carry over into Mark 12 and beyond, where Jesus is going to be able to is going to speak for an extended period of time, beginning with Mark 12 next week. But in order to get to Mark 12, we first have to cover these last verses of Mark chapter 11. So, as is our custom, I'm going to read the verses that are going to be associated with the Sunday sermon, and then we'll be able to kind of take a high view look at where we're going to go with it on Sunday. So here we go. Mark 11, 27 through 33. And they came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him, and they said to him, "By what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do them?" Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Answer me." And they discussed it with one another, saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, 'Why then did you not believe him?' But shall we say from man?" They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do things." Incredible passage here. This is a shorter one than what we've done in the past few weeks, but it deserves its own moment of reflection via sermon. And so these are the verses that we're going to explore on Sunday. And there are a few things that immediately jump out to us. The first one is we would be missing a really clear road sign if we didn't make mention of the fact that the three groups that make up one group, this conglomeration that makes up those who approach Jesus here in Mark 11, 27, are the same people that Jesus promised the disciples would hand him over to be killed all the way back in Mark chapter 8. So if you go back and look at Mark 8, right after Peter's confession of Jesus as Messiah, Jesus goes on to predict that the elders and the scribes and the chief priests would hand him over to be killed. And here we have them at the temple of all places, approaching Jesus with a question of authority. And so we would be out of line if we weren't making the connection between Jesus's past promise and now this moment here on the week of his passion, where these exact individuals approach him with a question regarding authority. And they're to detach this question of authority from the actions that we covered in last week's sermon. Jesus's overturning of the tables and disrupting the temple practices. That's what they're questioning. And they want to know, by what power did Jesus believe he had the authority to carry out those actions? And we're going to cover this in great detail on Sunday, but I'll just go ahead and give you the central thesis now. This question that the Sanhedrin bring to Jesus was meant to put him in a position where he either denounced his work and thus limited his power in the eyes of the crowd, or it was going to be enough to accuse him of the very thing that would lead to his arrest. They wanted to be able to accuse him of blasphemy. And so in this moment with this question, the Sanhedrin think they have Jesus cornered. They think either he's going to diminish himself and de-escalate, and thus his threat will pass, or he will say exactly what we think he's going to say, and then we'll be able to arrest him and eliminate him from his ministry. So the idea here is they think they have Jesus in a bit of a theological headlock. Now, what's incredible about Jesus is that he knows that he actually has them cornered. And we know this because Jesus's disposition and his response. Jesus, in a very rabbinical fashion, like you would expect of a rabbi, answers their question with a question. And so instead of just giving a blunt yes or no answer, or a very clear either or to where Jesus's authority emerges. Notice that Jesus instead asks them a question. And you'll notice that in verses 29 and verse 30, Jesus tells them to answer him, answer me. And so that in and of itself speaks to authority, that he is demanding of them a response. And notice that they don't shirk that off. They seek to answer him. So without even realizing it, they're in a way acknowledging his authority. But Jesus's question is an incredible one. He asks not for them to hear his answer about his authority, but instead he asks them, what do you think of John the Baptist's authority? And the reason why this is brilliant is because it was John the Baptist who was a forerunner to Christ. It was John the Baptist who baptized Jesus. It was John the Baptist who spoke against Herodias and Herod Antipas. And it was John the Baptist who the people believed was a prophet. And so because Jesus's ministry is necessarily bound to John the Baptist's, Jesus is able to answer their question through a proxy. And that's exactly what he does. He forces them to acknowledge the legitimacy of John the Baptist in a public setting, and in so doing, put themselves into a precarious position. And so we'll notice what that precarious position was. There, you can imagine them all huddled up, trying to think through how they're going to answer. And on one hand, they realize, well, if we say that John the Baptist's authority came from heaven, then he's going to ask us why we didn't believe him. And they might have even been thinking, and if his authority came from heaven and he baptized Jesus and he was the forerunner to Jesus, then by saying John the Baptist is from heaven, we are inadvertently saying he's from heaven, and it will no longer be him saying it, but us saying it for him. And so that's, of course, a problem. But then they also recognize that this is happening in the temple complex. This is not happening in a private setting. This is happening in a public setting. And they know that if they tell Jesus amidst a throng of people in the temple that they believe John the Baptist's authority came from man, the people are going to lose it, because they believe the mob of people, the people in and around the temple were big on John the Baptist. John the Baptist was a fan for many of them, and they genuinely believed he was from the Lord. And so if they say he's from man, it's going to make everybody mad. And because they have such a high opinion of having a high opinion in the eyes of man, they don't want to anger the people. They want the people on their side. And so instead of answering from a place of conviction and truth, they answer from a place of appeasement. And so they answer in the most dishonest way they possibly could. They say they don't know. And the irony is they know well and good, but they know they can't say they do. And so they take this cop-out answer and they're going, well, we're not sure. And from that point on, Jesus has exposed their hypocrisy. He has exposed that they are not being honest brokers in this back and forth. And so Jesus gives them the Matthew 7:6 treatment and says, I'm done with you. I'm done engaging with you. I'm done debating with you. You will get no answer from me. If you can't answer the simple question of where John's authority came from, then I'm not telling you where my authority comes from. And in that moment, he has caught the Sanhedrin in a position where they're toothless. There's nothing they can do to him in this moment. And so, of course, the Sanhedrin is going to have to regroup and find their next way to come at Jesus. But for this episode, we find that Christ's authority is ironclad, and at the same time, it actually showcases how weak authority were the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. And so that's all for now. We are obviously looking forward to Sunday, where we will explore this in greater detail, but it's a magnificent passage, and I very much look forward to seeing you all there. God bless you.